So here's what I was telling you guys before about working and how people make their money. I think that one of the rope-a-dopes that they put on you when you're black is you grow up and you're pretty much told that everybody has to get a job, that there's no other way to make money other than getting a job and using your human capital, selling your human capital, basically selling yourself back into slavery in order to make money, right? They tell you that because remember, if you think about regular slavery. Slavery was when someone else sold you and they made money from your labor. And so now modern day slavery is where you sell yourself, and you make the money from the slavery. But some would say that it's still slavery, right? Slavery to me is basically defined by a lack of freedom. And so, if you think about that, right, from uh, childhood, you're taught to sell yourself back into slavery in order to make ends meet, in order to pay the bills, in order to get by. Now, give me a yes or no if you follow what I'm saying on this. Give me a yes or no if that was your background. I know that my background, I wasn't really taught to do anything other than sell myself back into slavery in order to make money. So the best thing I could hope for was, getting a steady job, right? Not a good job, not a high paying job, but just a steady job. And then you make the next step. The next leap is you get to the point where you can get a high paying job. That's what you start to dream about. That was my big fantasy, was one day maybe I'll be a lawyer and make $400 an hour, or an executive and, make 100 grand a year or something like that. And then you discover the microaggressions and all these other things that happen in the workplace, all these ways that we feel like we're being mistreated as black people on the job. It's every single day. Microaggressions actually kill you. Like, that's actually a mental health issue. That's almost like what do you call it, a public health kind of issue. I think a Harvard professor actually explained how black men, especially, and women too, die younger because of the microaggressions and the racism and stuff like that. So then you experience all that and you say, dang it, to hell with this. I'm out of here. I'm going to go start my own business. So then you work for yourself. And then, so it's not it's slavery anymore, right? You're not a slave. You don't have to do it as much, but you're working very, very hard, right, to make money. So basically what you're doing is most of us start off as solopreneurs where we're doing all the work and we're making the big chunk of the money. So it's much better. Like, when you start going into that solopreneur space, that's when you start to find that the laws of economic physics start to change. It's kind of like how, if you watch, documentaries about outer space, they explain how, in certain planets, weird things happen, like the temperatures are 1,000 degrees, or you weigh, one third of what you would weigh on Earth, things like that. So you start getting literally out of this world in terms of the laws of economic physics changing. Like, maybe you have your first experience where you make $10,000, in an hour, right? Which is like mind-boggling for a lot of people. Or one of my friends actually started investing, and I showed him a couple of things. I play Call of Duty with him, so my buddies that I play Xbox with, I love doing it now. I started playing with my sons, but now I just like it, because it's fun. And so I showed him a little something in terms of what to do with some assets he had, and I think he made like 6 grand in a week. And it blew his mind. He said, my God, this is life changing. I've never made this much money this fast. Like, this is something I never knew that was even possible. And so somebody says, let's see what Charles says. Since joining this course, I've become obsessed. Yeah. Oh, wow. You were once a licensed private client banker. Yeah. Yeah. So Charles, you probably are in a better position to understand this than a lot of people. And because you've been around wealthy people. That's another thing too. Exposure shifts your expectations. So when you are exposed to things, you start seeing things that just don't make any sense. Like, how did that person buy a car that costs more than most people's houses, and he's only 27 years old? And you don't understand it. And a lot of times when we don't understand something, we say, oh, you must have cheated. That's what someone will say in your ear. Well, they cheated. It's because, or they were born with a silver spoon in their mouth. Or rich people, they just exploit poor people, right? These are the narratives that you're fed when, I know it may sound impossible to hear, but there are lots of very wealthy people who are decent people, who are ethical, who don't steal from anybody. They just understand the game a little bit better than most, right? So then, when you do that solopreneur thing and you have those first experiences that that boost your income. Maybe you're making 40,000 a month, 80,000 a month, 100,000 a month, even whatever. Then you start going into a different space where you start learning how to delegate, and you start learning how to, get other people working with you and utilizing technology. Um, the use of technology, the reason it's very important for Black children, you want your children to be well versed in technology, not just have the ability to make TikTok videos and all that. That's a start. My daughter makes a ton of TikTok videos, and I explained to her that the fact that she knows how to use these video editing tools so well means that she can do, she's able to do things at 10 that I've paid professional video editors to do who were 40 years old. I'm not kidding. Like, she can sit there and she knows how to change the lighting, the tone, and slow things down, speed it up, chop the segments, put them back together again. I mean, just all these things that a video editor could do. So that is a skill. There's no question about it. But going deeper than that, there is also the benefit of scale the technology gives you. And so if you want to know who I predict to be the next millionaires and billionaires, it's typically people that grow up in a high-tech space who also understand business. And this isn't just true in the age of the internet. This was actually true back when I was working on my PhD. There were it didn't take me long to figure out when I was working on my doctorate that the smartest people in class were typically the engineers who had switched over to finance, or the mathematicians who switched over to finance, or the computer scientists who switched over to finance, because they knew how to get on a computer and program specific tasks where, a lot of us would think that, a repetitive task needs to be done in a repetitive way. Like, maybe if we grew up in a factory culture, like we grew up in Detroit, we maybe had an auntie who went to work every day and pulled a lever all day long. That's all she did, was pull the lever all day long, right? So in her mind, if there's something that needs to be done that's repetitive, you just do it over and over and over again. Whereas a scientist or a tech savvy person would say, well, why not program a machine or program, something to do that task for you, right? So that understanding of technology, particularly when it's merged with business, allows for the just the rapid replication of economic outcomes. And so at that point, you're figuring out, okay, what's the right formula? What's the right model? And once you figure out the right model, you just program it to replicate itself. Next thing you know, you're scaling like crazy. Excuse me. That's why Mark Zuckerberg, starts Facebook in his dorm room. Eventually, he gets investors and all these other people involved. But now Facebook is $1 trillion company. You don't build $1 trillion. You cannot work hard enough to build $1 trillion company. There's no amount of work a human being could do to make $1 trillion. It's just not even $1 billion, right? And so what billionaires and trillionaires and millionaires and whatever, well, I could say $1 trillion companies anyway, what they understand is the power of scale. And the power of scale comes typically through technology and delegation. And so what's interesting is that as I started really studying delegation and how delegation and scale connects to making money, that's when I started thinking. I always go back. There's a technique in mathematics called dynamic optimization, where you figure out where you want to be at the finish line, and then you work your way backward. So I always think, okay, where do I want a Black boy to be at the age of 30? What do I want a Black woman to be by the time she's 28, 29 years old? And I go back and I say, oh, I get it now. In order for them to be in a position to really make high levels of money, you don't need the education that we're accustomed to, which is going to school and learning biology and gender pronouns and white history, whatever, right? You really need the kids to learn things like things that will be amenable to the ability to delegate to others, to be the ability to lead a team, right? So that might mean your child might need classes on not just leadership, but also how to manage and maintain relationships. That's a huge issue. Like in our community, people who can't manage relationships, they can't work with other people. So they cut everybody off. And then next thing you know, you're trying to do it all by yourself, right? You can't even keep your spouse in the house, right? Your spouse doesn't want to stay. You don't want them in there. So you break up. And next thing you know, you're doing it all by yourself. And the rules of wealth say that it's very hard to do it by yourself. It's like playing a team sport when you don't have a team. You can't win the NBA Finals with one player, even if that player is LeBron James. There's no player in the history of the NBA who could have won the finals by himself, right? So a lot of times when you're trying to do everything by yourself because you have maybe trust issues from trauma, or the inability to manage relationships, or you've been overly influenced by an ego-driven culture. I hear a lot of rappers, if you listen to them very closely, the hip-hop culture is very ego-driven. It's very much, look at me, I'm the best, I'm the greatest, I'm special, I'm better than you, right? And so that ego can undermine relationships, which makes it tough for you to do things like lead a team. Like, first thing I learned about leadership, I actually have a leadership coach. Her name is Nicole Price. She's an awesome lady. Dr. Nicole Price is one of my best friends. I love her to death. And one of the things I learned about leadership is that leadership really is service. That when you lead, you have to understand that you can't see yourself as better than the people you're leading. Just because you make money or you have power, you have to understand that your job is to get on the front lines and truly serve, right? So little things like that, learning those things early as children, prepares them to be successful. Like a child who knows how to get along with other people, who also understands a few things about technology and scaling, who was trained to be an entrepreneur, has a very high likelihood of becoming a millionaire. That person has a much higher likelihood of becoming a millionaire than a person who's trained to say, go get jobs, or who's overly influenced by toxic culture. And people wonder, like, why do you talk about these other areas, culture and relationships and all that? Because all those things link back to money. All those things link back to money. You guys have seen me do this. I can go through and dissect a hip hop song and explain all the anti-wealth building messages that are in that song, that create so much toxicity that you can't build anything. You can't grow flowers in toxic soil. It just does not work. So anyway, when you talk about that last tier, though, of wealth, the last piece is, even beyond scaling and delegation and technology, you then have that space where you built an asset base, right? So that's where a person has spent their whole life making money. They have a good, what is called in finance, we call this a plowback rate. So they're plowing their money back into their investments, back into their stock, into their real estate, into owning other companies, right? And so they start playing, really, really playing above the rim, where you're not working in the business, you're working on the business, right? People that work on the business are big picture visionaries. They'll sit there with a whiteboard and draw a couple of diagrams and explain to the team, like, we want to go this way, we want to do more of this and less of that. But they're not dealing with all the detailed little nuances of the business. There's a guy that came into the Black Business School by the name of Ace Chapman. He actually taught a class in the Black Business School. If you go to theblackbusinessschool.com, you can ask him about Ace Chapman's class. And he did a whole master lecture on how he's made millions of dollars acquiring businesses. And he sees his businesses as assets. He doesn't see them as things where he has yet another job to do, or the acquisition of another company doesn't mean he's got 10 times more work to do, right? Where he's really actively running several businesses. No, Ace just buys the businesses and he lets the people that are running the business run the business. He just positions himself as the owner, which gives him access to residual profits and things like that. And that sort of asset management is really, to me, that's the holy grail, right? That's why the things like the $5 a day investing plan are so important, which, by the way, guys, if you go to the allblackagenda.com, you can pick it up, the allblackagenda.com. The $5 a day investing plan is really important because that actually positions you, to create an asset base for your child. The winning strategy, like the holy grail, if you ever want to get to the point where your child is making money without working, build them a solid asset base and teach them how to use it. Because if they have an asset base and you teach them how to use it, it could be a bunch of stocks that they own. It could be a bunch of real estate. It could be a bunch of businesses. It could be all three, all of the above. Then, and they know what to do with that, then they can position themselves where all they do is just make decisions and they don't actually have to do any work. And they're literally making, some insane, ridiculous amount, like literally 10 times, 50 times, 100 times the average worker, and staying in bed all day if that's what they want to do, or going on vacation, or climbing mountains all around the world or whatever, right? And that's where rich people come from, right? When you see a rich person, I don't know if you've ever seen this, where you have somebody that literally cares nothing about money. Money is not even a factor in their life. They just choose what they want to do, and the money's always available. Well, that's because they have an asset base. So if you want your kids to be in an economically advantageous position, build them an asset base now. And then that way, when they get older, they can just manage the assets. They don't really actually have to do any work. The downside of that, though, for me anyway, is I grew up in a space where working kind of builds character, right? And so I want my kids to work hard on something. So even though I built a solid asset base for all my children and my godchildren, and if I die, they're all going to be filthy rich, which makes me unafraid of death, because now I've done my job. I've done what a man's supposed to do. I've left a legacy. I've left some assets, whatever. I still don't really talk to them much about, that in terms of giving them a bunch of money and saying, go to town, because the thing about it is that once you start acquiring assets, your next challenge is protecting those assets. And protecting the assets doesn't mean you're protecting it just from people that are going to rob you or steal from you. You're protecting your assets from your own family. You have your own relatives. If they're not conditioned and prepared with a wealthy mindset, right? And you know what I mean by that. There's that term is a heavy term. When they talk about wealthy mindset, don't underestimate the impact of that term. There are people that have a mindset that is built on wealth preservation, that is built on growing wealth, that is built on doing good things with wealth. But then you have people that have a mindset that's the opposite, right? If you give them $1 million, the money's going to be gone. And again, this is culture. That show BET's Blew the Bag. Go watch Blew the Bag, and watch how lightheartedly they describe people who had lots of money, like big opportunities to change their situation, and they just blew the whole amount of money. They blew the whole bag. So that's not funny though. But that's not funny because what you've done now is you put yourself in a position where you have to go back and become a slave in order for you to get what you need. So that's kind of that was what was on my mind today. And again, I'm on my honeymoon, and I know it seems weird that I'm doing this during my honeymoon, but I love this. Like, this is who I am all the time, every day, no matter what. And Alicia understands that. She's a professor just like me, so we love to teach and we love to talk, and that's kind of what we do. And so, by the way, everybody who's listening online, we're inside the Black Stock Market Program. I'm going to start answering student questions. If you want to join us, you can log in at the blackstockmarketprogram.com. So feel free to give it a try. You can try it for 30 days for free if you want to go take a look and see what it's all about. All right, so let's get started on some of what's going on with the stock market. One of the things I should tell you guys about the stock market is that this is just a great market. There's just money everywhere, opportunity everywhere. It's like a weather forecast where the weatherman tells you that the skies are blue for the next 7 days. It's going to be 75 degrees, not a cloud in the sky. There really isn't a whole lot to be afraid of right now. Now, of course, that could change very quickly, but the inflation scare is kind of being understood at this point where it's not such a big deal. It's hard to find a sector that isn't doing well, and I would argue that this would just be a bad time to uninvest or to take your money out. And so also, by the way, if you log in at the blackstockmarketprogram.com, you'll see some stocks I recommended this week. Go to what Dr. Boyce is buying, and I picked some companies that I really liked for this week. I don't have them all in front of me in my brain right now. I do know one of them was General Motors. General Motors, I think, is going to do well. I bought some General Motors stock because this chip shortage thing that's causing all this chaos in the auto industry, among others, it's eventually going to come to an end. But what's interesting, here's one thing that's interesting about the economy. I'll say this, then I'll get to your questions, is that microchips are kind of becoming this new, really competitive frontier across countries. And China said that one of their leading objectives, or their leading objective right now, is to reduce their dependence on other countries to get their microchips. And apparently it takes a ton of money, like $20 billion to build a microchip factory and many years of development to even possibly do it right. And so China has just made that a top priority. Biden put microchips into his infrastructure bill. About 65% of the world's microchips are produced in Taiwan, which is a national security benefit for that country, because Taiwan is in this constant conflict with China, where the Chinese are constantly threatening them. And they say that the only reason that China hasn't gone in and invaded Taiwan is because it would disrupt the microchip supply. So microchips have become a huge landscape in the global, in global economic and political warfare. And so the microchip thing is pretty fascinating. You may want to read up on that just to kind of understand how the dynamics work. The shortage of microchips has affected all kinds of supply chains on all different kinds of products. Alicia and I went to go buy a new car about it wasn't a brand new car. We always get a car about 3 years old. We don't buy brand new cars most of the time because they're just overpriced. You drive it off the lot, the damn thing drops in $10,000 in value. I got better things to do with my money. But we did get a car that's about 3 years old. And when we were there, that was one of the things that they mentioned. They said that because of the chip shortage, it's taken forever for them to get new cars. I talked to a guy who drove me to the airport, and he said that he'd ordered a brand new 2021 Escalade that was going to take 5 months for him to get it delivered. And I said, 5 months? And he said, yeah, because of the chip shortage. So this is a big deal. but this is going to go away. And so when it does go away, I wouldn't be surprised if automotive companies do better. So that's why I increased my stakes in GM and also in Ford. And I also talked to you guys not too long ago. I actually mentioned this on Twitter really quickly that I don't think, again, this is just me being an analytical asshole, I guess. I don't know, because I just call it like I see it. I don't really care how it feels or to sounds to people. Maybe I'm part what's that word, autistic, where you can't pick up on the cues or whatever. Who cares? But the but I mentioned this. I said I don't think Joe Biden is going to make it through 2 terms, and I really doubt he'll make it through 1. Now, why is that important? It doesn't mean I want the guy to die. This is not political. I wish him the very best. I hope he lives to be 1,000 years old. But I don't think he's going to make it, and I think Kamala Harris is going to be the first female president. And so what does that mean? Well, I increased my cannabis investments, substantially, because I believe that when they announce that Biden's not feeling well or that he's going to step down, I believe that's going to be a boost to the cannabis stocks, because that'll move us a little closer to legalization. Joe Biden feels that cannabis should be decriminalized. Kamala Harris feels like cannabis should be legalized. That's why she went on the Breakfast Club and said she smoked weed listening to Biggie and Pac when she was in college in the 1980s. Politicians don't say things just randomly. They say things to kind of give you clues and hints on who they are and what they believe and what their policy positions are. So I think that Kamala is going to be good for cannabis. And I'm not going out. I've had offers to buy into cannabis farms and get my hands dirty with it. And I just decided, you know what, I think I'll just buy a bunch of cannabis stock so that when cannabis pops off, I'll make money and I don't have to do any of the farming and all this other stuff. Okay, so those are my thoughts on this issue. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and answer some of your questions. Those of you listening online, I'm about to shut off the live component of the class out of respect for the students that are supporting the Black Business School. But if you want to join us in class, feel free to go to the blackstockmarketprogram.com, and everything's recorded. And also there's 5 years of content and there's a ton of stuff in there. So feel free to go take a look. All right, guys. So